Hello and welcome to Norman, Oklahoma. I'm Ryan Sylvia. This is Noah Taylor, and we are with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network. And Tennessee just came in to Norman, Oklahoma, wins 25-15. Obviously, the Josh Heupel homecoming. He says it's not about him, but clearly some emotions coming off the field, getting the game ball from Nico Imeliava, and some big celebrations. You can watch the full celebration on this VolReport YouTube channel. But just maybe less than an hour removed from this game, what's your biggest takeaway from what we saw unfold today?
I mean, again, a game where Tennessee, didn't play, wasn't crisp offensively the whole way through. I think picked up some steam, maybe in the second quarter, and in a drive that I think decided the game. That drive there before halftime when Dylan Sampson
every single play.
Yeah, every brand that took care of that entire drive for Tennessee. I think that changed the game. So it picked up a little bit there. But again, a little bit sloppy at times. Obviously, 2 turnovers tonight. But I think maybe that was what Oklahoma wanted. They thought maybe their best chance to hang with Tennessee was to invite them down into the mud, maybe play a little sloppy of a game. They didn't have the offense to keep up in that kind of game, which Tennessee ultimately prevailed offensively too as well. But again, this defense is just dominant, coming on the road in their first time this season, and just didn't miss a beat, man. I mean, they faced 2 quarterbacks. Obviously, Oklahoma had a little bit more of a rhythm, I think, or a little bit more life with Michael Hawkins back there. But ultimately, again, this defense is just, I don't know what else you can say about them. They're completely dominant in every facet of the game, and you saw that tonight.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, one of the biggest storylines coming out of a win like this is the tackle situation.
Yeah.
You obviously come into it, left tackle Lance Hurd, he's out with an injury. And then, I believe in kind of the second quarter, John Campbell Jr. goes down with an injury, tries to come back, ultimately can't. And the rest of the game, it's manned by Dane Davis and Larry Johnson III. And they did fine, but the ceiling of Tennessee with their starting 2 tackles compared to with those backup 2 tackles is very different. And Josh Heupel said after the game he expects or anticipates along those lines those 2 guys to be good to go the next time Tennessee takes the field. Maybe really appropriate timing with the bye week coming up for Tennessee before they head over to Arkansas. But this team is very different without those 2. It's a really good Oklahoma defense. They were sending the blitz pretty much every play. Nico was constantly under pressure, but you have to think maybe that's dealt with a little bit better. Maybe a little bit more of that playbook is opened up if you have your starting 2 tackles and if they're playing at a level that they've proven they can play in the past. Tennessee's offense in that second half, though, I mean, they just sat on the ball. And Josh Heupel talked in the post-game presser, like, I'm able to call the game completely different from an offensive perspective because of what the defense is doing, because of the faith you have in the defense to get stops. And that ultimately, I think, is part of the reason Tennessee wins the game. It got ugly. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't explosive. And it was almost hard to watch at times as they just kind of ran into a brick wall. But they're playing that field position game. They're playing the time or kind of running the clock game.
Yeah.
But I think the main reason they did that is you don't want to – the only way Tennessee loses that game kind of once they get that field goal in the third quarter and they start to kind of build that lead is if you turn the ball over. And Tennessee's already turned the ball over twice in that game because of misplays from the tackle position, and Nico gets strip sacked, or maybe Nico's under pressure, he makes another throw he shouldn't, tries to force something, and there's another turnover. I think that was kind of the only way that Oklahoma was able to climb back in that game. But kind of what were your thoughts on that second half and kind of the sluggish offense for Tennessee, but maybe purposefully and kind of worked out?
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. I think trying to play it safe. They felt like, Oklahoma didn't have the offensive firepower. Again, even with the backup quarterback situation, showing a little bit more life there in the second half, I think Tennessee felt confident that their defense would hold firm. And they did for the most part, obviously, on some penalties. You can take it however way you want on the Arian Carter roughing the passer call that led to an Oklahoma touchdown there. But I think you're right. I think Tennessee felt good that their defense would hold and that their offense didn't have to do anything spectacular, but sit on the ball. In a lot of ways, it felt like minus the lopsided score and not having your second, third team guys in, but it kind of felt like the second half of that Kent State game because, you go out there, you get a couple of Max Gilbert field goals and you're feeling pretty good, and that's what they did. I mean, a game, it's kind of, I know this is kind of a cliche, but a game that looks a little bit closer than it was. I mean, it never really felt like outside of that first quarter when Oklahoma had a couple good drives that the defense ended up, clamping down and keeping them out of the end zone, obviously. But outside of that, it just kind of felt like a game Tennessee was in control of, even with the offense being kind of sloppy again, like you said, probably by design to not do anything And really no reason to take a risk there with the tackle situation and with the score the way it was.
Let's talk Dante Thornton. He gets a big play over the middle, takes it to the house. Really the kind of most explosive play Tennessee has in the entire game. What are your thoughts on Dante Thornton so far? He seems like he's really a lot more comfortable in the offense this year than he was a year ago, and that's kind of obvious. Like, you've been in the system for a year now, but the way they're using him, he's not a starter. Mm-hmm. He's not really on the field for the first few drives, and then he's kind of just coming into these games and taking the top off of defense and making a big play. Like, is that how you'd like to see him continue to be used? Would you think that Tennessee could benefit from maybe playing him more? Like, what are your thoughts on where Dante Thornton is and how Tennessee's using him?
I mean, I think it's working right now. Obviously, that was a huge score for Tennessee in that juncture of the game. Again, it was that first quarter when it was, maybe a little bit clear. I think 3-3 when it was after Oklahoma tied it. It was a good answer. I think the way you're using him right now is good. Again, he does look light years more comfortable than where he was this time a year ago in that outside position, playing really well. Probably something maybe at some point you want to toy with and get him in there sooner and see what he does. But definitely a guy tonight, and Chattanooga didn't really need it much with the way that was, but a guy that I think has kind of jump-started this offense a couple times this year. And in that role, he's been really well. So I think obviously maybe something you want to explore later on, but in a game like this, I think they used him well tonight and probably see that more going forward.
And Deshaun Bishop, he's officially running back too for Tennessee. We've been talking about it for a little bit, about how good he's looking in his action and how he started the season behind Cam Seldon. Now he's pretty officially in that running back 2 spot, and it's not Cam Seldon's banged up, still recovering from that injury, but he played today. He was back for a kick return. So he was available. Like, he was here and he was available. Deshaun Bishop still gets all the secondary carries behind Dylan Sampson. And at times look better than Dylan Sampson. And I think if you probably look at yards per rush, we don't have the stats in front of us. I can't imagine he didn't have more yards per rush than Dylan Sampson. How impressive is it what Deshaun Bishop's been doing, and how critical is that for Tennessee to kind of finally solidify a spot behind Sampson as they go forward?
That was one of the biggest things I wanted to see tonight. And again, a lot of that could have to do with Cam Seldon's situation, but you can't come out of this game if you're Tennessee and not feel good about where he's at, Deshaun Bishop's at. If, Cam Seldon, comes back in or he gets back to full health, you got to feel really good about it. He came on the road. He handled it really well. Like you said, yards per rush, we don't know what it is right now, but I mean, he may have had more. There was a while there where Tennessee was really riding him in that third quarter. I thought, especially in a game that, again, Tennessee felt like they were in control of, but again, you're trying to put it away, and you're turning into a guy that hasn't played a whole lot of football. This is only his third game at Tennessee. Fourth. Okay, we'll go fourth. Fourth game at Tennessee. But I mean, a guy I think has solidified that spot. I was really interested to see how they would use him in a game of this magnitude on the road, and clearly they felt comfortable to turn to him. And there were a few drives there I thought that they just kind of let him take control of that backfield and did really well. And him and Dylan Sampson were really neck and neck in yards until kind of late when Dylan kind of put things away. But I think he's been really, really efficient and probably has locked up that number 2 spot for sure.
Well, Tennessee is now 4-0 as they enter their first open date of the season. After that, they'll head to Fayetteville to face Arkansas on the road before returning home for a long October to November homestand as they kind of get the real bulk of SEC play going. They'll have some interesting games. Obviously, Florida is always interesting when they come to Knoxville. Alabama is going to make their trip to Knoxville, their first time since getting knocked off in 2022, and their first time coming without Nick Saban in, 2 decades. Yeah. So it'll be interesting going forward. Tennessee right now, though, has positioned themselves really well for a playoff spot for maybe not even just getting into the playoffs, but maybe getting in that 5 to 8 range where you can host a playoff game in Neyland Stadium. Or at this point, with how Georgia looked against Kentucky, with how Alabama looked against USF, and how some of these teams have gotten off to some slower starts, I don't think you can put out of the question that Tennessee could be that team that represents the SEC as one of the top 4 seeds and gets a bye. We'll have to see how the season develops, though. And if you want to be there every step of the way, we will have you covered over at VolReport.com. Links to everything is in the description. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.